Hi, guys, and welcome to Crimes and Confessions. This is going to be episode 1, and we are going to be covering the case of Albert Fish. Now, this is an older case, much older. We're going to take it way back to 1928. Now, let's get into it. Albert Fish was an American serial killer. He was also a rapist, a child molester, and a cannibal who committed at least 3 child murders from 1924 to 1928. He went by some other names like the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, and the Brooklyn Vampire. Also, the Moon Maniac and the Boogeyman. So he is a suspect in at least 5 murders during his lifetime. He only confessed to 3 murders that police were able to trace to him. Now, what we're going to be discussing is one particular murder that occurred in 1928, and he was very calculated in what he did, especially back in 1928 when resources were not as easy as they are today. So his first victim was going to be 2 young boys that had placed an ad looking for work, and he had responded to that ad via Western Union with a telegram, and he had ended up showing up at the young boys' home under the ruse that he was a farmer, and he had a farm and he needed some help on the farm. Now, when he showed up to the house, he brought with him cheese and strawberries and said that they were from his farm. He had dinner with the 2 young boys and the young boys' parents. And the young boys had a sister, and her name was Grace. Grace was 10 years old, and she got to know Albert Fish during that dinner as well. And instead of him taking the 2 boys back to his farm to start work, he told them that he would come back tomorrow because he had a prior engagement where he was going to go to his sister's daughter's birthday party. Now, when he said this, it piqued Grace's interest because he said that the girl was about her age, and he asked the parents if Grace could go to the birthday party with him. And the parents said sure. He gave them an address that was a couple of blocks from their home and told them that he would bring her back later that evening after the party was finished. Now, long story short, Grace Budd never returned home. There was no such party. It was all just another ruse that Albert Fish used to his advantage. Instead of taking Grace to a party, he took her to an abandoned house. He told Grace to wait outside while he went upstairs and made sure that the party was going on. He went upstairs, got butt naked, and hid in a closet. When Grace came upstairs, she seen that he was naked and started screaming that she was going to tell her mom. She tried to get away, but Albert Fish grabbed her and strangled her. Now, Albert murdering the girl is bad, but what he does afterwards is worse, and what he does 6 years later is unspeakable. Now, once she didn't come home, her parents obviously called police, told them the situation, that she had went off to a party with a man that they had just met and never returned home. There was a detective that was assigned to the case. He got so invested that he literally did not retire because he wanted to close this case. Now, the case went cold. 6 years later, this detective had put a letter basically in a newspaper, and it was a false letter saying that they were close to capturing Grace Budd's killer. And he put this letter in the newspaper, It was to try to draw out the killer, obviously. And let's just say that it worked. But what happens next is extremely chaotic, I would say. So the killer does read the newspaper, and then he responds, but not in the way you might think. What Albert Fish does is he writes a letter to Grace Budd's mother. And I'm just going to preference this with, if you're squirmy, don't listen to the rest of this. Skip about a minute or two, because I'm going to read you the letter that he wrote to Grace Budd's mother. And viewer discretion is advised. I will also post the letter so that you can read it as well. Here is the letter that Albert Fish wrote to Grace's mother, Miss Budd. My dear Miss Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco to Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was a famine in China. Meat of any kind was $1 to $3 a pound. So great the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 years old were sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go to any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or a girl would be brought out and, just as you wanted, cut from it. A boy or a girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body and is sold as veal cutlets, brings the highest price. John stayed there so long that he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11. He took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them up in a closet, and then burned everything they had on. Several times a day and several times a night, he spanked them, tortured them to make their meat good and tender. First, he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass and, of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except for the head, bones, and guts. He then roasted in the oven all of his ass, boiled, broiled, fried, and stewed. The little boy was next, and he went the same way. At that time, I was living at 409 East 100th Street. He told me so often how good human flesh was that I made up my mind to taste it. On June 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street and brought you potted cheese and strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs, stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I didn't, I would get blood all over them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called to her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her and said she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death. Then I cut her up into small pieces so I could take the meat into my rooms, cook, and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though. I could have if she wished. She died a virgin. Now, this letter was written and sent to Grace Budd's mother. Now, fortunately, because of education, her mother was unable to read it, but her brother did read it. He immediately contacted authorities and handed over the letter. To like and subscribe so that you can hear more from Crimes and Confessions. And also comment below on cases that you would like to see me feature. Bye!